Hey friends, how are you? Welcome back. This time we're going to be talking about the Prayer of Examen. And in order to do that, I have two books right here that I'm going to briefly just talk through, but I don't know about you. I have found that it's very much important and even necessary to stop every so often and to reflect on the day. And in fact, I think it was Socrates that said the unexamined life is not worth living. And according to the Christian tradition, we also say the same thing. But before I get started and talk about the Prayer of Examen, I think I need to briefly just say something. I would like to say that I love having these conversations and treating them as though we're just having a one-on-one conversation, myself and whoever's watching. It could be even just a few of you. However, I appreciate the informality of it because I think it allows us to have a little bit different type of a conversation. And I would love to start by saying we learn to read the Bible for very good reasons. We need to know some of the tenets of the Christian faith. We need to understand the stories that happen. But there's something even more unique, that we do this fancy thing called hermeneutics, which is the interpretation of the Bible. It's the fancy word for it. We do that so that we can see the people and the characters and the events and then discern how God is working through those events that we read about in Scripture. But it shouldn't just stop there. In fact, we actually do biblical hermeneutics, maybe so that we can also learn how to do living hermeneutics, which means we read the Scriptures to understand the people and the events and how God's working in them, so that we can then turn and do that to ourselves in our own lives, to examine the people and the events and find where God is in the midst of the Scripture of our own lives. And that's brilliant, and that flows so well into what Socrates says about the unexamined life is not worth living. And that's exactly what the Prayer of Examen is all about. The Prayer of Examen is one of the things that I personally do. I usually do it with a journal. In fact, I have mine right here. I've got a moleskin that I've been keeping. Actually, I've got about 15 volumes of that now. But the Prayer of Examen was started by Ignatius of Loyola, who was a Jesuit. He was a contemporary of sorts with Martin Luther, and even on the Catholic side, he knew that the Catholic Church of his day really needed some reform. And one of the most famous statements that he said was, "You want to reform the world? Good. Reform yourself first, or all of your work will be in vain." But he also had this tendency, or this desire, to, quote, find God in all things. And that's part of what the Prayer of Examen is about. It's learning how to reflectively go back over your day and examine where are the events where God was present. My phone alarm is going off again. Such is life. But you know what? That helps to keep this, I guess, informal and like a normal conversation. Anyways, to find God in all things is a pretty heavy task, but actually, you don't have to be smart to do it. You don't even have to be well read. You just have to know how to reflect. So what I have here are two books that have been very formative for me. The red one more than the orange one, but I'll explain both. Ignatius of Loyola was formerly a soldier, and then he literally got shot with a cannon, and it broke his legs. And so he was laid up in an infirmary where, as he was laying there, he read a number of books on the lives of the saints. And in his pride, he said, "I could be really good at humility," which is very ironic, but he kind of succeeded. And while he was there, he developed what we know as the spiritual exercises, which are 4 weeks of prayerfully and with imagination reflecting on the things that happen in Scripture. But then during that time is also when he developed the Prayer of Examen. And the Prayer of Examen has got 5 parts to it. And in this edition, this is called Draw Me Into Your Friendship. This is an English translation because Ignatius was actually from Spain. So the original text is in Spanish. But David Fleming did a very good translation of it, where on one side, it's the literal translation from the Spanish, but then he made it into a more contemporary. And it's super helpful. But in here, let me find the page. He has the Prayer of Examen. And it's something that's very early on in the book. And if you ever have a chance to, I would highly encourage getting this. I put a link to this in the notes. But there are 5 parts to it. The first is just to give thanks. You always want to start prayer with a mindset or posture of gratitude rather than cynicism. That's actually something I usually deal with. Cynicism can get a hold of me. I don't know about you. But to intentionally sit down and reflect on the day, starting with gratitude, actually hardwires your brain to interpret things in a more positive light. Second is to ask for help so that you can see the grace of God in your entire day. So first you start with gratitude. 2, you ask for help on reflecting on the day. So helpful. 3, it says to go back over the events of the day. And some people prefer to do this hour by hour. That's not quite how I'm ordered. I prefer to look back over my day in like 3-hour increments. Just think about it in morning, day, afternoon, evening. Just go back through and review your day for that purpose of which I said earlier, of looking at the people and looking at the events of the day and figuring out where God is in the midst of all of that. Now, that includes both the victories and the defeats of the day. You're not looking for one or the other. You're actually just looking through the events of the day as they happen chronologically. What successes did you have that day? Where did you glimpse God? Where did you fail or have a misstep throughout the day? And where was God in the midst of that? But as you go through the whole day, you're going to find that your day was probably filled with 2 types of things: consolations and desolations. Now, those are just fancy words for good things and bad things. But all of us are predisposed to do something. Either only focus on the good things or only focus on the bad things. And so it's very important to learn how to look honestly at your entire day and see, oh, it was full of both good things and bad things, consolations and desolations, successes and failures, things that helped me to grow and things that set me back. So step 3 is really where I think the meat of the Examen prayer is. Number 4, though, is to ask for forgiveness for the places where you did not listen to God, where you did have some missteps, where you did have some failures or frustrations. And then 5th, which is wonderful, is that you pray that God can give you grace and strength to continue doing the good works that you maybe did, to keep living in growth, to keep living in health, to keep growing in holiness. Ignatius was actually one of the first people, no, that's not true. There was a number of people that tied being healthy and holy together. And that's wonderful. But the Prayer of Examen, just very briefly, 5 parts. 1, you give thanks. Start off with gratitude. 2, you ask for help to look at the day with some real honesty. 3, you pattern your reflection of the day chronologically, and you think about what were the goods and the bads of the day. 4, you ask for grace for the places where you fell short. And then 5, you ask for more grace to continue growing in health and holiness. Now that's how David Fleming talks about it, and that's kind of how I distill it for myself personally when I write it in my journal. But another very helpful book was this one, The Jesuit Guide to Almost Everything by James Martin. And in here, he has his own breakdown of the Prayer of Examen from Ignatius of Loyola. So if you have a chance, and I understand right now we've got a fair number of extra time in our day, you can order this one, you can order that one. And I believe you can get this one on Kindle if Amazon isn't able to mail very quickly right now. But I don't think this one's on Kindle or digital. I think you have to buy the original. But I would say, as you grow in the spiritual life, it's very difficult to do it on your own, and even to fully just invent your own practices. You really do have to look back through the church history, see what are the best things that have been offered, and then really do like, what's that phrase? The plunder of the Egyptians. You take what you like and you leave the rest. So this has been just an introduction to the Prayer of Examen. We're encouraged to do it every day. You can maybe do it at lunch, or you could maybe do it at the end of your day, whenever you feel like you're cognitively the most able to reflect on the past 24 hours. But I would encourage, if you want to grow, this is one of the best ways, and it will change your life. That's why we do these things, because these spiritual practices, they cultivate us and they grow us, and it's very much like gardening. The Prayer of Examen and all these other spiritual disciplines are very much about learning how to pull the weeds out and plant some better plants in the garden that it is our own soul. So thank you for coming and checking this out, and we'll see you next time. May grace and peace be with you. Thank you so much.